In today's video, we will be discussing one of the most captivating and tragic figures in Greek mythology. Medusa, once a beautiful maiden, became a symbol of terror and fascination, her tale intertwining with gods, heroes, and the very essence of ancient myth. Join me as we delve into the life, curse, and legacy of this infamous Gorgon, exploring the deeper meanings behind her story and the lessons it imparts. Medusa's story begins in a world where gods and mortals often crossed paths, a time when the divine and the human were deeply intertwined. Medusa was born into a family of sea deities, known for their beauty and grace. Among her siblings were the Gorgons, Stheno and Euryale, who were immortal and fearsome in their own right. However, Medusa was unique. She was the only mortal among them and possessed an extraordinary beauty that set her apart even from her divine kin. Medusa's beauty was legendary, and her striking appearance captured the attention of many. Her long, flowing hair shimmered like gold in the sunlight, and her eyes were said to be so captivating that they could enchant anyone who looked upon her. Her beauty was not just physical, but also carried a sense of purity and innocence, qualities that made her a devoted follower of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and craft. Medusa served as a priestess in Athena's temple, where she dedicated herself to the goddess, embodying the virtues of chastity and devotion that Athena cherished. Medusa's role as a priestess required her to maintain her purity, a vow she took seriously as a testament to her loyalty to Athena. The temple where she served was a place of peace and reverence, where the sacred and the mortal worlds met in harmony. However, Medusa's beauty became both a blessing and a curse. It attracted the admiration of many, including Poseidon, the powerful god of the sea. Poseidon, captivated by Medusa's beauty, desired her and pursued her relentlessly. One day, Poseidon's desire for Medusa became overwhelming, and he approached her in Athena's temple, seeking to claim her as his own. Medusa, caught between her devotion to Athena and the advances of a god, found herself in an impossible situation. She pleaded for Athena's protection, but the goddess did not intervene. In a moment of desperation and violation, Poseidon took Medusa against her will within the sacred walls of the temple. This act of defilement in a holy place was an affront to Athena, but rather than directing her wrath at Poseidon, Athena's anger fell upon Medusa. In her rage, Athena transformed Medusa into a Gorgon, a creature so hideous that her very appearance would turn anyone who looked upon her to stone. Medusa's beautiful hair, once her pride, became a mass of venomous snakes, and her eyes, once enchanting, now held a deadly power. The transformation was both a punishment and a protection. It ensured that no one would ever harm Medusa again, but it also condemned her to a life of isolation and fear. Medusa's life after the curse was one of solitude and terror. She fled to a remote island, where she lived in isolation, far from the gaze of mortals and gods alike. Her new existence was a stark contrast to the life she had known as a priestess. Once revered for her beauty and grace, Medusa was now feared as a monster. The island where she lived became a place of dread, where no one dared to venture for fear of being turned to stone by her gaze. Despite her monstrous appearance, Medusa was still a mortal at heart, burdened by the memory of her former life. She was haunted by the loss of her beauty, her purity, and her connection to the divine. The snakes that adorned her head were a constant reminder of Athena's curse, hissing and writhing as if to mock her former glory. Medusa's loneliness was profound, as even her sisters Stheno and Euryale, who shared her Gorgon form, could not fully understand the pain of being mortal. Medusa's isolation was interrupted only by the occasional adventurer who sought to claim her head as a trophy. Many brave warriors and heroes attempted to slay her, lured by the promise of glory and riches. However, none succeeded, as they all fell victim to her deadly gaze, their bodies turned to stone and left as grim statues on the island. These intrusions only deepened Medusa's despair, as she became increasingly resigned to her fate, knowing that she was doomed to live as a monster, feared and hunted by all. The legend of Medusa's curse spread far and wide, and her name became synonymous with terror. Yet, despite her fearsome reputation, Medusa remained a tragic figure, a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Her story is a powerful reminder of the capricious nature of the gods and the fragility of mortal life in a world where divine beings could alter one's fate in an instant. Medusa's transformation from a beautiful maiden to a monstrous Gorgon was a cruel twist of fate, one that left her forever marked by the wrath of the gods. Medusa's life, after her transformation, was marked by a deep sense of sorrow and resentment. Once a priestess revered for her beauty and purity, she had become an object of horror, her name whispered in fear throughout the ancient world. Her cursed form became a symbol of divine punishment, and her very existence served as a warning of the gods' unpredictable and often unjust nature. As she wandered her isolated island, Medusa's thoughts would often drift back to her previous life. The Temple of Athena, once a place of solace and devotion, now seemed like a distant dream. Medusa remembered the serene days she spent in prayer, tending to the sacred rites, her heart filled with the purest intentions. Now those memories were tainted by the betrayal she felt, not just by Poseidon, who had violated her, but by Athena, whom she had served so faithfully. The goddess's punishment felt like the ultimate injustice, for Medusa had been a victim, and yet it was she who bore the curse. Over time, the island where Medusa dwelled became littered with the petrified remains of those who had sought her out. Each statue told a tale of a life ended in a single tragic moment. Heroes turned to stone in mid-stride, warriors forever frozen with their weapons raised in futile defiance. These stone figures were silent companions in Medusa's solitude, a grim reminder of the fear she instilled in others. Yet, for Medusa, they were also a reminder of her own suffering. She took no pleasure in their deaths, for each encounter only deepened her sorrow, reinforcing the curse that had been thrust upon her. Despite her terrifying appearance, Medusa remained deeply human at her core. She longed for the touch of another person, for a word of kindness, for some form of connection to the world she had lost. But these desires were impossible to fulfill, for anyone who came near her met a swift and terrible end. Medusa was trapped in a body that inspired only fear and revulsion, a prisoner of her own monstrous form. Her loneliness was absolute, and the curse that had been meant as a punishment for her perceived transgression had, in truth, turned her into a tragic, isolated figure. Her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were the only beings who could come near her without fear of being turned to stone. Unlike Medusa, they were immortal and shared the same monstrous appearance, but they did not carry the same burden of mortality. They could not fully comprehend the depths of Medusa's despair, for while they were cursed, they did not live with the same sense of impending doom that weighed upon Medusa's heart. To them, the Gorgon form was simply their nature, To Medusa, it was a cruel transformation that had ripped away her humanity. The island became a place shrouded in myth, a forbidden zone where only the bravest or most foolhardy dared to venture. The gods themselves seemed content to leave Medusa in her misery, a living embodiment of their power and their wrath. For years, she lived in this cursed state, her existence becoming more a legend than reality to those in the world beyond. Yet, within her monstrous exterior, Medusa's thoughts and emotions remained as complex and as deeply felt as they had ever been. Medusa's story took a new turn when the hero Perseus entered her life. Perseus, a demigod and the son of Zeus and the mortal Danae, was tasked with retrieving Medusa's head as part of a dangerous quest set by King Polydectes. The king hoped that the seemingly impossible mission would result in Perseus's death, thus eliminating a potential rival. However, Perseus was not without help. The gods, including Athena and Hermes, provided him with the tools he would need to accomplish his task. A reflective shield from Athena, winged sandals from Hermes, a sword from Hephaestus, and the helm of darkness from Hades, which rendered the wearer invisible. Armed with these divine gifts, Perseus set out for Medusa's island. The journey was perilous, and Perseus knew that a single glance at Medusa would mean his death. As he approached the lair of the Gorgon, the sight of the petrified warriors who had come before him served as a grim reminder of the stakes. Yet, Perseus was determined, his resolve bolstered by the knowledge that he was on a mission sanctioned by the gods themselves. When Perseus finally found Medusa, she was sleeping, surrounded by the silent statues of her victims. He approached her cautiously, using the reflective surface of Athena's shield to avoid looking directly at her. The sight of Medusa, even in her monstrous form, was a tragic one. Perseus could see the traces of her former beauty, now twisted by the curse that had befallen her. In that moment, perhaps, Perseus felt a pang of pity for the creature before him, who had once been a woman of great beauty and purity, now reduced to a life of fear and isolation. With a swift motion, Perseus raised his sword and brought it down upon Medusa, severing her head from her body. In that instant, Medusa's life ended, and her curse was lifted. From her blood, as it spilled onto the earth, sprang two new beings, the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor. These miraculous births were a final testament to Medusa's enduring connection to the divine, even in death. Perseus carefully placed Medusa's head in a special sack, for even in death, her gaze retained its deadly power. He would later use it as a powerful weapon, turning his enemies to stone with a mere glance. Medusa's head became a symbol of both fear and protection, embodying the dual nature of her legacy. Medusa's death marked the end of her tragic life, but her story did not end there. In death, Medusa achieved a kind of immortality, her image enduring through the ages as a symbol of power, rage, and the complex relationship between beauty and monstrosity. Her story has been retold countless times, each retelling adding new layers of meaning to the myth. Medusa's transformation from a beautiful maiden to a fearsome Gorgon, and ultimately to a figure of legend, is a powerful reminder of the enduring impact of the myths that shape our understanding of the world. Through the ages, Medusa has come to symbolize much more than a simple monster. She represents the injustice of punishment for a crime she did not choose, the complexity of victimhood, and the destructive power of both divine and mortal wrath. In modern interpretations, Medusa is often seen as a figure of female rage and empowerment, a woman wronged by those in power, but who ultimately wielded her curse as a weapon. Her image, once feared, has been reclaimed by many as a symbol of strength and resilience. The story of Perseus and Medusa is one of the most famous tales in Greek mythology, not just because of the daring hero who confronted the fearsome Gorgon, but because of the intricate weave of divine intervention, mortal courage, and the profound consequences that follow. The saga of Perseus's quest to slay Medusa begins long before the two even meet, shaped by the whims of gods and the ambitions of men. Perseus, born to the mortal woman Danae and the king of the gods, Zeus, had a destiny intertwined with the gods from the very beginning. His birth was itself a marvel of divine intervention. Zeus, enamored by Danae, visited her in the form of a golden shower, and from this union, Perseus was born. However, Perseus's early life was fraught with danger. His grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, fearing a prophecy that foretold his death at the hands of his grandson, cast Danae and the infant Perseus into the sea, sealed in a wooden chest. But the gods protected them, guiding their chest to the island of Seriphos, where they were taken in by the kindly fisherman Dictys. As Perseus grew, he became a strong and courageous young man. But his life took a fateful turn when King Polydectes, the ruler of Seriphos and Dictys' brother, set his eyes on Danae. Polydectes desired Danae for himself, but he knew Perseus would not allow his mother to be taken so easily. To rid himself of Perseus, Polydectes devised a cunning plan. He announced that he intended to marry Hippodamia and demanded that each of his subjects bring him a horse as a wedding gift. When Perseus, who had no horse to give, boldly declared that he could bring the king anything he desired, even the head of the Gorgon Medusa, Polydectes seized the opportunity. Feigning delight, he accepted Perseus's offer, knowing full well that the task was likely a death sentence. Medusa, the Gorgon, with the power to turn anyone who gazed directly at her into stone, was the perfect target for such a perilous quest. The Gorgon sisters were feared throughout the ancient world, but Medusa was the most infamous, both because she was the only mortal among them and because of the legend surrounding her cursed beauty. Her lair was said to be a place of unspeakable dread, filled with the petrified remains of those who had dared to face her and failed. Yet, despite the dangers, Perseus accepted the challenge, his resolve unshaken. Perseus knew he could not accomplish this task alone, and fortunately for him, he was not without allies. The gods, always keenly interested in the affairs of mortals, decided to intervene on his behalf. Athena, who bore some responsibility for Medusa's fate, was determined to assist Perseus in his quest. She provided him with a polished shield, so reflective that it could be used as a mirror. This shield would allow Perseus to see Medusa without looking directly at her, thus avoiding her deadly gaze. Hermes, the messenger god and guide of souls, also came to Perseus's aid, gifting him winged sandals that would allow him to fly. Additionally, Hermes gave Perseus a sickle-shaped sword made of adamantine, capable of cutting through the toughest of materials, including Medusa's scales. Finally, Hades lent Perseus his helm of darkness, which granted invisibility to its wearer, enabling him to approach Medusa unseen. Armed with these divine gifts, Perseus set out on his journey, guided by the gods at every step. His quest took him to the ends of the earth, to the lair of the Grey Eye, 3 ancient sisters who shared a single eye and tooth among them. These sisters were the only ones who knew the location of the Gorgon's lair, and Perseus, using his cunning, stole their eye, refusing to return it until they revealed the secret. Reluctantly, the Grey EA directed Perseus to the island where Medusa and her sisters resided, deep in the heart of the desolate western lands. The journey was arduous, but Perseus finally reached the lair, where the Gorgons slept among the statues of their victims. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, the silence only broken by the occasional hiss of the serpents that crowned Medusa's head. Perseus, invisible under the helm of darkness, approached cautiously. His heart pounded in his chest as he navigated the labyrinth of stone figures, each one a testament to Medusa's lethal power. As Perseus drew closer to Medusa, he could see her reflection in the polished shield, a pitiful sight despite her terrifying appearance. There was a profound sadness in her features, a lingering trace of the beauty that had once been hers before the curse had transformed her into a monster. Perseus knew that he was not just confronting a fearsome creature, but also the tragic remnants of a life ruined by divine caprice. Yet, his task was clear, and he could not afford to falter. With one swift and precise stroke, Perseus brought down the adamantine sword, severing Medusa's head from her body. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. From Medusa's blood, as it spilled onto the earth, sprang Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse, and Chrysaor, the giant warrior, both symbols of Medusa's lingering connection to the divine. Perseus carefully placed Medusa's head into the special sack given to him by Athena, aware that even in death, her gaze retained its petrifying power. As Perseus prepared to leave the Gorgon's lair, Medusa's sisters, Stheno and Euryale, awoke to find their sister slain. In their grief and rage, they pursued Perseus, but the hero, aided by the winged sandals of Hermes, escaped their wrath, flying high above the earth and out of their reach. With Medusa's head securely in his possession, Perseus set off for Seriphos. His mission accomplished. The journey back was not without its own adventures, but eventually Perseus returned to Seriphos, where he confronted King Polydectes. The king, who had not expected Perseus to survive, was astonished to see him return. When Polydectes scorned Perseus's claim to have brought back Medusa's head, the hero revealed it, turning the king and his court to stone in an instant. With Polydectes defeated, Perseus installed Dictys as the rightful ruler of Seriphos, ensuring his mother Danae's safety and honor. The story of Perseus and Medusa did not end with the Gorgon's death, for the legacy of Medusa's head would echo through the ages. After completing his quest, Perseus gifted Medusa's head to Athena, who mounted it on her shield, the Aegis, as a powerful symbol of protection and terror. The head retained its petrifying power, serving as a reminder of Medusa's enduring influence, even in death. The legacy of Medusa is complex, spanning centuries of interpretation and reinterpretation. Originally depicted as a monster to be feared, Medusa's image has undergone significant transformation over time. In ancient Greece, her story was one of caution, a warning against the consequences of hubris and the dangers of divine retribution. Medusa was often seen as a symbol of the terrifying power of the gods, her image used to ward off evil and protect against harm. However, as the centuries passed, Medusa's story took on new meanings. In Renaissance art, Medusa was often portrayed with a mixture of horror and fascination, her image evoking both beauty and terror. Artists like Caravaggio captured the tension between her once beautiful features and the monstrous curse that had befallen her. Medusa's head, with its serpentine hair and wide, petrifying eyes, became an iconic image in Western art, symbolizing the duality of fear and allure. In more recent times, Medusa has been reclaimed as a symbol of female power and resistance. Feminist interpretations of the myth view Medusa not as a monster, but as a victim of patriarchal oppression, a woman punished for her beauty and for being violated. This reimagining casts Medusa as a figure of righteous anger, her gaze a form of defiance against those who seek to control and dominate her.